take a couple of steps back um, and talk a little bit about um, uh, Kafka now and why one might read Kafka in relationship to the law right now. And I want to, but first I want to say that it was important for me to subject you to a closer reading. And the reason for this really is that I sometimes think we jump too quickly to our theoretical frameworks and tend to impose them on a text when actually a text can, well, it can lead us in a different way. I mean, when Benjamin read Kafka, he said, oh, here in Kafka, we see the convergence of a certain theological problem with a problem of modern urban life or urbanization, city life, factory life, work and labor issues, which is, by the way, very true and still true. But I would suggest that one reason to turn to Kafka now is precisely because we're living in a time in which indefinite detention has become a norm in legal life, in political life, and that does not, I'm sure, strike any of you as a particularly surprising claim. But if you would hang with me for some moments, I'd like to lay out a little bit about what is at stake in thinking about indefinite detention through Kafka, and I plan then to bring us back to Before the Law and some of the texts we've been reading. As you know, indefinite detention very often, in the case of migrants seeking access to the US or Europe or other areas, indefinite detention is a legal or administrative power. It's like the administrative power of the law, but it doesn't mean that it is justified or that it is governed by clear law. And it also invariably involves the suspension of due process in the service of detaining populations that are seeking either to exercise international rights, to achieve asylum, or to be reviewed for migration cases, to achieve a legal standing of some kind, or to keep them from making a claim of citizenship. And I think that indefinite detention has increasingly become a norm, and it's a norm that is very often invoked or implemented through the invocation of security, national security, where national security very often means nationalism or national identity, national unity, or explicitly racist policy. And in many countries, whether dealing with new migrants or a perceived threat of terrorism, or imagining that migrants are by definition terrorists, putting someone in indefinite detention takes place without the need to supply a legal ground for doing so. Security is invoked. Security is a national political principle, a question of national interest. But security is always a strange term. Security for whom? Whose security at the expense of whose? And sometimes, I would suggest that detaining someone or some group of people in the name of security turns out to be an effort to secure the continuation of a particular regime. And it does involve endangering the lives of those who are detained, since they don't only, lack rights of citizenship, they lack rights to healthcare, they lack rights to mobility. And very often when it's national security that is invoked, it's at the expense of international accords that would under usual circumstances, if there is such a thing anymore, international accords that would guarantee rights to be considered for asylum, rights to healthcare, rights to legal counsel. So, that's, part of the situation. I'm thinking the southern border of the United States, but also the European borders, also the prevalence of administrative detention in Palestine. And of course, this is a situation, and also, by the way, under apartheid in South Africa, indefinite detention was cultivated as a form of arrest and release and arrest and release. And Edith First, as you may know, documented that in her memoir, which I think is perhaps one of the more important works on indefinite detention, showing how it works. Detained without a cause for a certain number of days, legally compelled to let somebody go, only to arrest them again, sometimes at the door, at the threshold, to bring them back, keep them again, let them go, bring them back. I just learned yesterday that in the state of California, sometimes migrants are arrested and tried, released, set free, exonerated, and then rearrested and tried again on the exact same ground. So one person locally was tried 4 times on the exact same grounds. So you have to wonder what has happened with the legal regime when this becomes something like a norm or a pattern or a deeply entrenched habit. There's lots to be said. I think we could talk about Australia as well in this regard, about the practice of indefinite detention. But it very often involves a kind of criminalization of migration itself. And as we've seen in the Mediterranean, a criminalization of humanitarian efforts to safeguard the lives of migrants. So indefinite detention seems to be a situation, it's an administrative situation that is not precisely legally justified. It's a state that into which people are put prior to a legal proceeding, right? Or in the place of a legal proceeding, even though it is an exercise of legal power. And that's important for us to consider as we consider the different senses of law that are operating here, and I will get back to it. Indefinite detention